Hi, Amedeo Beretta here, and in this video we're going to see how to create storytelling-driven dramatic lighting for animation in an actual animated shot belonging to a short movie. This video is an extract from one of my Twitch streams which I recorded while providing training for the people involved in the production of Alma, the short movie I supervised. You can watch it by following the links under the video. Alma is a short movie produced at Escape Studios by students belonging to several different classes. We will start by evaluating the color key, then we will establish the time of the day and define the key light, followed by the fill light, and finally we will add a rim light. In the process, we are going to make sure that the characters which are important in terms of storytelling will stand out from the background and the secondary characters. Finally, we will go through a summary of the operations we performed. As you see, the shot features a robot leaning over a flower, while in the background there are some other robots and an industrial background. We want to make sure that the flower and the robot stands out from the crowd, but we don't want to lose the secondary characters. In this video we're not going to go over compositing, it's just about lighting and we're going to employ Redshift. However, what we do is applicable to whichever render engine you utilize. So hop aboard and let's get started. We have quite a lot of work to do. We have a short with a robot that we want to light up. We have a particular scene which needs some particularly dramatic lighting in a way. So we are going to try and do that scene. And then based on time, we will see what to work on next. So this will be lighting for animation, pretty much dramatic lighting at that. We want it to look relatively realistic, but we want it also to serve the story. So let's get started. We have our scene here. The scene has a bunch of robots and we should have a camera. Let me check. There you go. We have a camera. What's important in this scene is that we want to see this robot looking down and we want it to stand out from the crowd. It's a pretty active scene. Francesco, who is here today in the chat with us, is the person who will have to light this thing up. What I did, Francesco, I think it's time for us to do some look dev as well. So I already assigned some shaders to the robots that they look like the color key that you painted, because otherwise it starts to become very difficult to work. And I think we should do that on the rig itself so that now we can do look dev a bit more properly. Also, I have with me the references. Our original mood board had this kind of setup. There was a light coming from the top right corner, everything else was a bit darker, and there was a robot there. That was what it was. This is an old version, which was a bit too green. We also have our other references, but not particularly for that shot in there. So we have choppy, but this is not for our shot. So we are going to have to make it up in practice. First of all, what's the time of the day? So we know that our short movie is a bit nondescript as time of the day, is based on routine. But we know that there needs to be a change in lighting in this particular shot. If you think of it in here, we want to have some God rays. They seem to come pretty diagonal. So that seems to me that the sun is not very high on the horizon. So I'm thinking maybe I could go for some sort of dawn-like light to begin with. So a low sun, not very high, but I will have to decide a little bit because I think dramatically speaking, I might need to take some leeway there. Now we established the time of the day. Let's say it's early morning. Let's say that it starts in the previous shot. It was a bit overcast. So when the clouds are covering the whole sky, and now we want to have a bit of light coming through, as in God rays. We're not going to do God rays in Maya. We're going to do them in Comp, but we can light this thing up already. The first thing I want to do is some key light, and then we do the ambient. So the key light, the color key is fairly precise. There's a key light coming down that way. So we want to have that. I'm going to create a redshift light, and it's going to be a typical redshift physical light. And that light I'm going to place here somewhere in front of the robot, and then I'm going to scale it up quite a lot, and then I'm going to point it at the robot. Originally, I wanted to start with the ambient light, but then I thought, well, let's do the main light, the one we really need to have in there. And this is the main light. If I shine that light down, maybe I could even have a look at it from the perspective. I should already get to something that works. Let's see. The first render you do in Redshift is going to be pretty slow as a startup, and then it goes faster after that. There you go. So I'm looking at the first pixels that come out and I'm thinking, yeah, okay, this is probably a bit too bright already. And I'm going to stop the render because I already know it's too bright. And as a first thing, I think I'm going to reduce the resolution of these renders so that people at home won't wait that much. Wow, I don't really know what's coming out of this. I think we have a little bit of a problem with the light. If you grab the light in Redshift, you see that the multiplier is set to 100. So that's pretty high. So I'm going to set the multiplier to 1 to begin with. So hopefully now if I go back, let's frame it a bit better. So I will frame the robot this way. I should be seeing the light shining down on the robot there. Let's see. Let's see if this time I get a render that makes some sense. My camera is going to glitch because of the fact that Redshift is using a lot of GPU. Let's check the camera. Let's see if the camera is rendering properly. There you go. Okay, so the camera is rendering properly. And you see that right now we have our character in there and it's lit up. The problem is that our color key is pretty clear about how things should be. There should be a clear, strong light just for the robot and everything else should be a bit darker. That's the dramatic effect I want to have. So I'm going to store this thing as a snapshot. I'm probably going to also remove the depth of field because that's going to make everything go a lot slower. So let me just remove it. There you go. And then I'm going to, first of all, try to focus that light on the main character. So I'm going to go grab the light, and area lights in Redshift, they can come in various shapes. Maybe I will start with rectangle, and then if need be, I will go cylinder. I want to keep it simple for now. So that's the rectangle there. If you're unsure what your light is pointing at, you can select the light. You can go under, I think it's panels, and then look through selected. And this is what the light is looking at, you see? So I'm looking at the robot right in the middle of the screen. So it's a bit crazy, but maybe if we rotate the light to 0 and we start over, then it will be less crazy. Let's see it again. Look for selected, you see that's better. And in here you see I can rotate the light and I can shine it right down at the center of the screen onto that robot. If I go back to perspective, you see that I'm looking indeed at the robot there. So I'm going to tweak it a little bit. I'm going to make it smaller. And the first issue we are going to have is that the light by default, you see, was shining on those robots as well. That's because there is something called spread in here. See these little arrows here at the side? If you lower the spread to 0, they close. And now the light is only going out straight out of that panel. Let's try it. Let's maybe try it just to see if it's true or if I'm making that up. And you see that now the light is right on the robot and only on the robot. Not bad. If you think of it, we are following the reference. On the reference, the key light is for the robot only. So now it's almost like a theatrical light, if you think of it. Almost like, I wouldn't want to insult Caravaggio with this, but Caravaggio used to do the same kind of direct cinematographic lights. Of course, I think the rendering took a bit longer than in Redshift back then. So the problem I have down here is that I have this, you see, the square of the light. I don't quite like it. Maybe I will try to do a disk and I want to see what happens in there. And you see, if I do a disk in there, then all of a sudden I have a bullseye there, almost even more of a theater-like light. Very dramatic. And you remember, drama is what we're going for. So we really need that to be dramatic. In the meantime, I probably want to reduce the window of pure ref because it's getting in the way. There you go. I will keep this as a memo. It's a bit too dramatic or a bit too staged, and I think the edges are a bit too solid there. So I need to do something about that. So I will go grab the light and I will open up the spread ever so slightly. I should get a softer light in there. I can open it up a little bit more. And you see that as I open it up, I start to see a bit of the other robots there. But I'm interested mostly in the main robot there. So I don't want any other robot so far. The key light is for the hero. I think I'm sort of okay already. I can maybe open it up a little bit more. And you see that now the other robots are also emerging from the darkness there. Not too bad, not too bad. Maybe I will close it ever so slightly. Oops, sorry, that's not ever so slightly. That's opening it. So there you go. Something like this will work. I will store this as a snapshot I will stop Redshift for a second and I will look at it again. So this was the light when it was fully open with the spread set to 1. So the light will go in all directions. And this one is the light with the spread set to 0. So it's a lot more focused on the character. And if you want the attention of the audience to be on the character, then you need to shine a light on it. The other thing is the color of the light. Which color should that light have? Well, I think it should be the color of the dawn, the color of the sun when it's still pretty low on the horizon. So maybe I could go back to HDRI Heaven and I will copy this image. I will paste it there on PureRef so that you see now I have also that image as a color, and that image is a lot more precise than my color key. And then in the light itself, let me open up Redshift. In the light itself, I can go up to the color, sample the color of the rocks in there, or even the color of the sun, but you see it's pretty bright in there. So I will start with the color of the rocks to begin with, and then I will hit play to see if that makes any difference, because now the light is very, very cold. It looks like a theater light, which is not too bad if this were a theater piece, but this is not a theater piece. This is supposed to emulate an exterior shot. So I need the sun to have a color which is a bit realistic. Now, I expect the light will be a lot warmer. There you go, look at that. In fact, we're getting there. So I found the right rotation of the light. I found the way to give it a spot effect, and also I found the color. If I want the light a bit brighter, I can go into the color and I can just push up the vibrance quite a lot and go towards white in there, and that should make it colder and a tiny bit more intense, I guess. But for the real intensity, I have to increase the exposure. So I will go over the exposure. So usually I set the multiplier as the first thing, and then I set the exposure as the second thing. Once I set the main multiplier value, I'm not going to touch it. I'm going just to work with exposure. So if I push up the exposure to say 0.5, we should get a bit more light in there, because you see it's increasing the exposure. So I will go to, I don't know, let's try 0.8. I will go up to 1.5. We're getting there. Now, the main issue you're going to encounter with a character which is white, in my opinion, is that it's very easy to burn. So that it's very easy to bring the character to full white. So let's have a look and let's just check the head. The head is the part that burns really easily because it's really close to the light. So I will just tune that head by using this crop tool in here. When I press play on Redshift, I only am tuning that area. That's the same of Maya's or Arnold's IPR system. So you only render what you need. So you see that we start to get a bit too bright in there. So maybe I'm going to stop. But these are not even the colors and the finer shaders. But you see it's pretty burnt already there. So I think I'm going to stop, and I'm not going to push the intensity any further in there. But one thing I can decide right now is to maybe shine the light a little bit more, from a little bit higher, and then rotate it down a little bit just to see if I get a more dramatic effect in there, because it feels like the light is almost horizontal if you check the shadow in there. I'm not looking for that effect. The color key was pretty clear. The light comes from that direction. So first I want to follow my references, and then if I think they don't work, I will go somewhere else. So I think in here now the light is a bit more realistic in my opinion, because it comes from a bit higher and the shadows aren't nearly as long. I store this thing and I can compare. So light fully open, and the first orientation I got, light closed, first orientation I got, light a bit not that closed with the new orientation. And you see that with the new orientation, I am focusing a lot more on the character and this flower that is down there. See, a lot more in fact. Look at that. Now this area that earlier on we were lighting, but it wasn't really useful for anything, is not lit anymore. And now with the focus is entirely on the character and on the shadows the character casts. So we're getting there. Now, it would be cool to create an environment around this character to remind us of what is around the character there. So to do that, I'm going to grab exactly the HDRI that I found on this website. It's called the Lost City, and I need it to be mapped onto a dome. So let's see how that's done. So I will go Redshift, Light, and I will go Dome Light. And in there, a little dome is created. I will make it bigger so that you see it's there. The scale does not affect lighting, not even the position. It's just the rotation of the dome that affects lighting. If I launch a render this way, I would probably get a bunch of white, bright light flooding through. Let's see. There you go. We are getting there. So you see that now the characters are visible. The background starts to become visible. the problem we have with this is that this is taking away a bit from the foreground, so that's an issue. And now everything is tinted exactly the same way, and it doesn't have that contrast that I used to have in here between the round light and the environment around it. It's gone. It's no longer there. So I think we're onto something, but not necessarily what we want. Also, it looks a bit like a Star Wars scene at the back. They look like Star Wars troopers marching in the background, and there's a dude in front of them. So let's see if we can give it some context. Into the dome map, you can browse the dome map. You can go find a texture, usually into the source images. I have a folder called HDRI, and I have the lost city. I click on open, and now hopefully I will have this picture here that is our source light. So I expect the colors to be a lot different now. And you see that now I have the colors which are a lot different because there is significantly less brightness coming through from that dome. And you see that now I recovered that contrast between the main character light and the background. And yet I managed to pull out the background a little bit just to give some context to our lighting, just so that it doesn't look like just a theater bullseye there. Well, in Italian, that round light that you have in theaters is called bullseye. I'm going to check, and we have fully open, fully closed, a bit open and colored and rotated to favor the character, and you see a bit of the background is coming out. Then we have an HDRI that was shining just white light, a dome, and then we have a dome with the colors of low light in the morning. And you see that now, all of a sudden, I retain the contrast and the environment. Not bad, not bad. We have to think of what's important in this shot, and also we have to think if maybe we can give a hint of this kind of lighting that we see here, maybe on the background as well. Maybe this light is not only for the character, but maybe some of it will be visible also, you see, in the background. I can't exactly do the same lighting that I see in here, I think, in the color key, but I can certainly try. So let's see. Usually a good idea, a thing you can try and do, is to rotate your dome to try and shine the same light but from a different direction. Let's see how this lighting works in the perspective. I want to check the camera settings in there, and I'm going to use to render out the perspective very quickly. I wish it was very quickly, but I'm not sure it will be the case. You see that dome is visible outside in the environment, and it casts this beautiful ray of light down in the environment. The problem is that that ray of light will never probably reach our scene. So let's have a look and see if we can make it reach the scene. So I can grab the dome. Maybe I can crop the render so that I don't render stuff that I don't need. So I just need this area. There you go. So let's make it smaller. So now I can grab the dome and I can rotate the dome. And you see that by rotating the dome, I am rotating indeed that line of light. And the bots here, the bot line, is not being hit by that line of light, but that line of light is actually hitting the background. So I think I'm onto something there. So I think I will need a different layout. So you see, you really need to have a look at it and make it work in 3D first. I think that's how I would start anyway. And after I have a feeling that that could work in 3D, I'm going to check the camera. And I'm going to check the camera point of view. If I am correct in my evaluation, I should see the background lit in there. You see that indeed, now the background is lit. The problem is that the fact that the background now is very happy is a contrast, too much of a contrast. We now have a background which is almost as important as the character, which is not what we want. So I'm going to rotate back the dome ever so slightly. And you see that by doing that, now I have half of the background which is lit and half of the background which isn't lit. So maybe that's a bit more interesting. I will rotate it ever so slightly. That's too much. There you go, something like this. This way, you see that the background is collecting some of the light that has a bit more character, that is similar to the key light we have in here for the robot. So the light that we have in here for the robot won't be simply a light that is only there and nowhere else in the scene. Also, that colored environment is kind of warmer than everything else around. So then my key light, for instance. So I think I want to grab my key light. I'm probably going to make it a little bit warmer. So let's tune. So I'm going to go and make it a tiny bit warmer. So now I am matching the background and foreground warm light a little bit more. I'm going to store this thing again, stop the render, and now I have the previous environment, which was giving us some of the light on the environment the way I wanted it, and then I have the same environment, which is also giving us a hint of the things of the light that is also behaving like a key light. So I tie together the background and the foreground a little bit better. I give them a hint. So what's important in this shot is not only the robot, but the fact that the robot is looking down at something. This something seems to be a plant there. So we want that plant to be a tiny bit more visible. And in here, we're going to go for a dirty trick. We are going to create another light. I'm going to go into the perspective, go find the key light. The problem with the key light is that if I make it brighter, it's going to burn the head of the robot. So I need to shine a light only for the daisy down there, for the flower. So I'm going to duplicate this light and I'm going to move it down, or yeah, closer to the daisy. But as I look at it, I'm thinking, before I even take care of the daisy, I think it would be nicer if the character was a bit more in light, even more than now. The problem is that I can't increase the light coming from there because it's going to burn it. So I'm going to create, instead of a disk, I'm going to create a rectangle, and I'm going to use that as a panel to shine light onto the character itself. I expect to be seeing only the character in the light in there. So see, those kind of panels that you also see around in photography studios, these kind of panels, these guys. So I'm going to use it as a reflector. It's not really a reflector, it's still a light, but I think it could do some decent work. I expect this will hit also the robots in the background. Let's see. So I'm going to hit play and I will start tuning. And you see that A, the light is visible. That's not a big deal because you can click on visible and that light will be invisible again. And B, now the character is a lot brighter, and the good thing is that that light is not affecting the background at all almost, which is good. Because now, if you defocus, if you blur your vision, you will spot that the character is a lot brighter than it was earlier on. Let's make a comparison. This was earlier and this is now. You see that now the character is a lot brighter and a lot more important in the screen. The contrast on the screen, the contrast between the background and the foreground is a lot stronger, and we didn't burn the background, or we didn't hit the background with that light as well either. I think now maybe I want that light to A, have the same color, and it has it already, and maybe I need it to be a little bit softer, and maybe I can open it up a little bit more. There you go. And now I have my light in there. Cool. And I have my character, which is a lot stronger. It has a much stronger presence in camera. That's good. So I'm going to store this thing again. So you see how I start from nothing, and then I first introduce the dramatic lighting, the theme, and then I introduce the background once the character is there. Then I amalgamate the background with the character, amalgamate the background with the key light, and then I reinforce the main character until the main character stands out quite a lot. If you think of it as you work, if you plan it, it's going to take just a few minutes. We, I think, want to have a bit more importance for the flower. We want that flower to be a bit clearer. So maybe we could think about brightening up the face a little bit. This is the face of the character so that it's a bit more visible. And I'm going to play a bit of a dirty trick in there again. So I'm going to create another light. Usually you don't really need that many light. I mean, for a regular lighting, we should be done. We have the dome, we have the key light, and we have some sort of fill light to make the character a bit brighter. We need some other lights, in my opinion. We would need maybe a rim light for the background and for the character in there. But let's make sure that the flower is important in this scene. So I'm going to duplicate the last light that I've created. I'm going to make it a disk, and I would like this light to be brightening up the flower. One thing I can do, I also could use this light to brighten up both the flower and the face of the robot. So I'm going to shine this light right into the face or onto the face of the robot, make it a lot smaller. And then as a last thing, one thing that you can do is make the light bidirectional. So now the light is shining light both in one way or another. As I go back and I will start by tuning again, I expect the light to be, the face of the robot to be a bit brighter and the the flower to be a lot brighter because the light is right there in the middle. And you see that now the flower as well is a lot clearer on frame. I think the light is a bit strong, to be honest. So let me store this and compare with the previous render just to see. And in the previous render, you see that the flower was underwhelming, was barely visible. In this new render, you see that the flower is a lot clearer. We really pushed it up. We could have done it in comp. So maybe we do not need another light. Whether you need another light to cheat this thing depends greatly on how's the shot. If the character were moving a lot in frame, then I wouldn't really place a light in here. I would probably do it in post. I would just color correct the flower to be a bit brighter. Now the face is a lot clearer than it was before. You see that? But probably a bit too much. So what I'm going to do in there is I'm going to tune down that light significantly. Let's see. Maybe I need only tune that area. Also, the idea is that if I make a light that is emanating almost from the flower, it will almost feel like it's the flower that is brightening up the character itself, which in our particular story is a thing. So maybe I will lower the intensity even more there. I don't want to burn anything. In the perspective, I'm going to move the light a bit over the flower. Maybe you can try opening the light, spreading it out a little bit more so that the intensity will be lower on the face, but a bit more everywhere else. So let's check the result. We can make it, we just have to be patient. Also, that creates a bit more of a hot spot down here where the flower is coming from. So I'm going to stop there, and I'm going to store, and this was before, this is after. So you see that now the face is bright, but it's not as burnt as it was, because now the light is a lot more open, so it can't focus the rays so much on the face as it did earlier on. So it's going to be a bit more diffused. And we still have some sort of hot spot on the flower down here, which we didn't have earlier on. So now that's a lot clearer. Now, I think as a last touch to this shot, we can maybe think about a rim light. So maybe we could think about brightening up a little bit the background robots from the left-hand side. After all, there's going to be sky on the left-hand side, right? And maybe this robot as well from the left-hand side. So let's do it. I was saying we would need to brighten up the robot maybe from the back so that we detach it a little bit more from the background, because right now it's this area here, maybe this area here, they are a bit flat and they tend to mix with the background there. So I'm thinking of painting a line of light somewhere on the left-hand side of everybody in there. So the cheapest thing I can think of there is maybe a directional light. The seat is open, so maybe if I shine a directional light from this direction, I should be able to hit everybody on the back with the light. So I'm going to create a redshift light, again, a physical light. And this time around, as a type, I'm going to use directional. So the directional doesn't care where the origin is, doesn't care how big it is. So even if I scale it up, it's not going to really change the intensity of the light. The only thing that matters to the directional is the orientation. So if I, for instance, if I shine the light vertically down, I'm going to find that the floor is going to be pretty bright. Let's see. There you go. You see that the floor is pretty bright now. Also, the intensity multiplier is super high. I will set it to 1. You see that that brightens up the floor quite a lot. The directional light is there to give you a simulation of the sun, of the key light, but we don't want to shine it on the floor, because that's not why we have it there. Remember, we want to shine it at the back of the robot, and we don't want it really to touch the floor that much. So if we make it nearly parallel to the floor, then the floor should stay dark as we wanted it, while the character should be invested by light coming from the left. Ooh, I can't wait to go and work in real time. Let me increase the exposure quite a lot to 1. There you go. Now, we'll wait a little bit, then I will store the snapshot and do a comparison. I suspect this light is too bright, but let's see. I will store the snapshot, stop the tuning, and this, look at this. This was before the rim light from the left. You see that now there's more volume in the robot here, and in the robots at the back, and also in the background more in general. Look at the background, it has more volume there. Now this is of course a bit too much. I mean, I like it, but it's too much. So I'm going to tune it down by half, and I'm going to check the result. And also I want this light to be colored. I want this light to come from somewhere. So if the light comes from the right hand side, then the blue sky will come from the other side. So I'm going to sample the color of that blue sky, so that you see that the light now starts to become blue. That's a bit too blue, so probably I can just reduce the saturation quite a lot, so that we are still on the blue side, but we are not really tinting everything that blue. And we give it a minute or two to think about it while my webcam glitches because of the GPU overuse. And let me stop, and let's see what's going on in there. So I am going to store the snapshot once more as usual. You see that now earlier on it was pretty bright. Now it's a lot more subdued, a lot more subtle. And the advantage is that whereas the character earlier on was a bit melting with the background, now there is a bit more contrast here between this side of the thigh and the background, which was darker, and we have a nice contrast, yellow to blue in here, which gives the idea of an environment which has a clear direction of the light and a color, while on the other side there is just the sky. And at the same time, I am creating a bit more volume for the people in the background, which used to be a bit flat. You see, they were just blurs. In our scene, eventually they will be blurred anyway, but we want that blur to betray some volume, if we may say so. Now, if we wanted to create even more contrast, we could go between, probably it would be a good idea to group all these lights so that we don't lose them. It would be a good idea to go into the dome maybe and reduce the intensity of the dome. If I reduce the exposure a little bit, then the dome will make the background darker, but the character will stay just as bright. In fact, I will lower the dome quite a lot. And you see that by reducing the intensity of the dome, I bring the character out. I bring the character forward towards the audience. Now the character, this is a bit more of a theatrical light, if you think of it. And if we put each light onto its own light group, we can do this theatrical light in comp, and we can tune it in post-production the way we want. So that's also something that we could employ in here. I think, in fact, as we fade at the end of the shot, we could fade first the dome light, make it darker and darker, and then fade the robot later on, as if we are in a theater almost, and the last thing that goes out from the audience is the robot, because the robot is what we want to see during the shot. So this would be more or less it, I think. I think we have something. In terms of render setup and render layers and AOVs and all that stuff that is very useful for post, I think we would want to have an AOV for the character, one for the characters in the background, one for the environment, and one for the shadow of the character. And then the usual crypto matte pass. So I think this is it for this shot. So I will store this render, and that's pretty much it. Just to wrap up, I would say let's have a look at the comparison again. So at the beginning there was nothing, just black, and then light. Where did I hear that? I think somewhere else. Then we wanted that light to be focused on somebody, this character, the man, and there you go. The problem was that's a bit too theatrical. So, and also it doesn't look like the light coming from the sun early in the morning. So let's make it yellow and let's open it up. There you go. And let's focus it a bit more on the character. That's nice. But then certainly the rest of the environment would need to be visible. So a dome was created. The dome was okay, but the problem with the dome was that it was shining white light only, but that environment isn't white. Dawn, you would have a much more yellowish light and also bluish sky. Actually, we are a bit after dawn. Then this way we grabbed an HDRI, and all of a sudden
the environment seems to be a bit more realistic. The problem was, I guess, that in the background we didn't have quite a hint of the warm light coming from the sun. And while we don't want that hint to be too strong, we also still want it. So we rotated the dome, you see, to introduce a little bit of a hint of the key light. Then, once we had that, it was time to brighten up a little bit of the robot, so that it was a bit more brighter, a bit more visible. But the problem was that although it was brighter, the flower, which was also important when we're seeing, wasn't, and also the face was pretty dark. So I created a light between the robot and the face to brighten up both the robot face and the flower, so between the robot and the flower, but that was a bit too bright. So I dimmed that light and I opened it up to make sure that it wasn't burning either the flower or the face. And then, finally, I added a backlight that was too strong initially, but after a bit of fine-tuning, it was enough for us to detach the back of the character from the back of the environment, and also to give some volume to the environment. So that was the workflow. I hope you have found this useful, and if that's the case, please like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell.